In this lecture, we'll look at how the novel comes to be adapted in India. There are some scholarship and influential scholars on whose work I am building on here. The foremost of them will be Meenakshi Mukherjee. Then there are works that Meenakshi Mukherjee has two works. One is Realism and Reality. The second will be Early Novels in India. Then there are contemporary scholars like Ulka Anjaria, who have worked on the Indian English novel and then edited volumes by Vaidik Bhattacharya and Sambuddha Sen, titled Novel Formations. What these works tell us is in very detailed ways is the way novel worked in India. Is the way novel worked in India, novel came to India, novel came to stay with us. Right? In the last lecture, I was telling you about that the conditions which helped the growth of novel in the West are not the same as India itself. And that's why we need to think about the Indian novel not only as a derivative of the Western novel itself. And there are multiple factors and reasons to this, that why do we need to think of it in those terms. So, the first thing that we need to think about is what happens to a culture like India, which in the 7th century has a text like Kadambari by Banabhatta, or a text like Katha Sarit Sagar, Somdev, or the Jataka tales, or epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana and its many retellings. We have certain prose narratives in these kinds of forms. We have a tradition of tales, telling tales, and a longer tradition of orality. We also, from the Persian literary cultures, we have things like Dastan, Kissa, Afsana. We have all those traditions also. So, when novel comes to India, it comes to interact with all these forms of prose writing, the Kavya tradition in India, then you have what is called the Itihasa. Mind you, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they are, according to Meenakshi Mukherjee, one is labeled as Kavya, the later Mahabharata is labeled as Itihasa. So, one has to also think about these kinds of distinctions. So, you have Kavya, Itihasa, you have Dastan, Kissa, you have tale-telling tales, and then the Charita also, that is part of the Indian way of writing, probably comes closer to writing a biography in that sense. So, when novel comes to India, it comes to participate, and especially in the charged atmosphere of 19th century, when novel is being written in many languages in India, you have these variegated discourses that are already available. So when a Indian writer is writing a novel, consciously or unconsciously, they are borrowing from many of these traditions along with the novel as they know. And this is a peculiar and particular kind of novel, that's the Victorian novel. The Victorian novel, with its realism, comes to impinge on the Indian novel itself, right? So then we need to think about how it participates in these traditions itself. So whenever there is a discussion of the 19th century Indian novel in Indian novel, one has to think about all these proximate discourses. One more proximate discourse that is also thought about and needs to be worked on more, as highlighted by Bhattacharya and Sambhuddha Sen, will be the discourse of the official governmental language itself and treatises. Because many of these 19th century writers are also engaged with the colonial government. So they also look at prose in those documents itself. So the prose that they are going to write, and many of them mimic that prose, comment on it, critique it, the legal discourse that is there. One of the first Odia novels written by Fakir Mohan Senapati, Six Acres and a Third, mocks this jurisdiction, this legal discourse itself. So you can see that that is also part of it. The other discourse that contributes to this, as identified by Meenakshi Mukherjee, is coming out from the missionary presses, predominantly the Sirampur mission press, which is printing translations not only of Bible but also Pilgrim's Progress and other discourses of Christian religious belief, which have a direct impact on writing of the novel in India. So we have, and if you look at the board now, you can see the various discourses that are participating in making of the Indian novel in 19th century. And if one goes on to think about the early Indian novels in different languages, one will see the presence of all of this there. You will see that there is the kind of circular narrative that Kadambari champions. You will see the tale-telling tradition of Kathasarit Sagar. You will see the description of Kavya. You will see the inclusion of Kavya aesthetics, as we will see in Rajmohan's Wife. You will see a reference to Itihasa and writing of historical fiction, let's say, which it translates into in Bankim's Durgesh Nandini, Anandamath, other kinds of works by other writers who will also again impress upon writing about the history of India and conjuring a different kind of history than their present itself. Then you will also have Charita, one of the first prose tracts, pre-novelistic experiments is in Telugu is by Enugula Veeraswamy, Kashi Yatra Charitam. So the description, the travelogue itself, a spiritual travelogue where someone is traveling to Kashi and writes about the places, and in the course of writing about places, writes about themselves. So you have Charita, and also how this biographical shapes the discourses of the I, as we are talking about the individual in that sense, the individualistic sense of the novel in the first place. Then we also have the Katha tradition. You will see official language seeping into the novel itself. I have already told you about Fakir Mohan's example. And then you have the Victorian realism itself that comes into, in a very strong way, into all the novels, that they start describing ordinary lives. They start describing very important and not so important figures of history. So you have, on the one hand, if Bankim is writing historical fiction, he's also characterizing someone like Matangini, someone like Madhav, who are not figures of history or important figures of their world in that sense, right? So you have that insistence on the ordinary. The description of the place itself, when we read Rajmohan's Wife, we'll see examples of it. And then you also have people who are participating in Dastan, Kitsa. If you read, for example, in Urdu, Umrao Janada, and other texts that are again at the beginning of the novel tradition, you will see experiments of this kind. So the Indian novel then emerges from all these discourses. It's not solely reliant on the Victorian novel. It's not solely reliant on the Victorian novel. We'll actually come to what the Indians are reading at this point of time, thanks to Priya Joshi's work. But one sees a stunning interrelation between all these discourses that are outlined here. So, therefore, one needs to remember this very important fact about the Indian novel itself. The Indian novel in 19th century is constituted by these variegated discourses. Now, there is another way that we can think about the novel itself, right, in India. So, if we just think about the novel as it is practiced in India, think about the terms that it uses, right. In most of North India, the term that is used for the novel is called Upanyas. And one needs to think about what does this word nyas mean and what does this word upa means. Okay. There are also languages which call it as Navanyas, again, which will tell you that these two words have come. Upa also has something that comes across like Upakatha. So, that Upa here and this Upa here, are they similar, is a question one should think about. Sometimes this Upa means a shorter description, a shorter Katha, Upakatha. It also can mean beyond in that sense. Nyas has been thought of as a kind of arrangement, as the way that we arrange. Sanskrit origins and means that it's arranged in a specific way or a orderly way. Okay. So, and that's why you can see that this is a new way, Nabanyas, that this is a novel way of arranging things, recalling something like formal realism as what was talking about. Now, that's why you see why it was very important to contextualize the Western novel, because you see what we think in terms of Nabanyas, Nyas being a way of arranging, can find some echoes in the way that what is thinking about realism, because it also is a way of arrangement, that you have particular description, you give a lot of detailed background information, you give a lot of empirical description of the space itself. That is what formal realism insisted on. Nyas here just talks about a way of arranging stuff. So, novel also means a new way of arranging things, and reality. The other words that are used in other languages, for example in Urdu, they just simply call it naval, which is very funny that they just took the word and adapted it to their own circumstances. Gujarati calls it naval katha, drawing from the katha tradition here. So you have uh, a new kind of katha, upakatha. Again, you have katha here. So you can see the participatory nature of this. So one can think of the way that, and then it kind of highlights the layered and rich and profound intersections that novel has in India. Very interestingly, Marathi, the word for novel is Kadambari, and the novelist is called Kadambarikar. That's what Meenakshi Mukherjee tells us. So, one highlighting the first, the ancient 7th century work, Kadambari, which is a frame tale, that the narrator is telling a story about telling a story to someone else, right? So, one also like Sudraka listens to the account of the Sukha bird. The Sukha bird listens to Maharshi Javali's story, which contains Mahashwata's story in it. The story within a story within a story kind of a thing that we are very familiar with. Another example will be the famous Arabian Nights. So, what you get to see is that there are already this pre-novelistic first texts, and there are pre-novelistic genres already existing, and you have a kind of a intersection that is going on. So when one has to think of the Indian novel in 19th century, one has to factor these in. The next one that one has to think about writing novel in India, unlike that the facts that was outlined by Watt or McKean, here the motivations seem different. Why were people writing? It was not because of emergence of the middle class or something of the sort. In some cases, the government actually announced prizes that you can write, like the government was announcing prizes and incentives throughout 19th century in various parts of India to write textbooks. They were also providing incentives to write novels in their own languages. So one of the early novels in India in one of the vernacular languages is actually written because the government paid incentive to the writer, and the writer participated in those in that context. Many of them were pushed by questions of modernity in the sense of education. Bankim was one of the 7 students who passed out from the Calcutta University's first batch. So he was familiar already with novel form because he studied in English education. So he already knew about it, and likewise many others across India who were beneficiaries of colonial education. Modernity presented certain challenges for them. The English education provided them with certain challenges with their own world around. So, therefore, they started thinking about writing their social realities, and they thought of novel as the discourse that could be thought that could fit right in. Then there are some who are guided by reformist ideals. The best example will be Chandu Menon, who in his introductory prefatory remarks to Indulekha talks about how he is writing this novel, and he is creating this idealistic character called Indulekha, who does not exist. And then Chandu Menon tells us that You will not find such a character now, because it's impossible for a Malayali girl at this point of time in the Malabar region to exercise rights over her body and desire at this point of time. So he is writing this so that in the coming decades you will see a lot many Indulekhas, and he will be glad if people are able to see a change in the society in terms of gender rights, to put it in today's terms. Some others were writing out of nationalist feelings. 19th century is also the time of rising nationalism itself in India, that the British are here and we need to think about our motherland. Anandamath by Bankim is famous for the Vande Mataram song, which goes on to become the song of our national independence struggle. Some novels come out of that impulse itself. However, the novel puts the British in a very curious and positions them in a very curious way vis-a-vis the Hindus, sannyasis, and the Muslims in the novel itself. But Vande Mataram and also the thinking of India as the motherland comes from Anandamath itself. So we have various motivations other than learning about the novel form and bringing it to India. So many people who are writing in novels in various languages like Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, Tamil, Odia, Telugu, all of these writers have to balance, incorporate, and negotiate with various impulses, as we are talking about the impulses of modernity, the impulses of education, the impulses of reformist ideals, the impulses of governmental incentive, and then they have to also contend with these various forms, these various indigenous literary expressions that are already here in India. So, thanks to all of them, the Indian novel emerges as a composite, and we have novel in India which then has to negotiate few particular issues that the Western novel takes as sacrosanct. We'll look at them in the next lecture.